Okay, in the last video, I went over why Borderlands 3 was not funny. This is an objective truth, and understandably the reason many couldn't finish the game. In fact, I got my copy of the game as a graduation present from my friend who no longer wanted it, and I've heard of so many others not being able to finish the game because of the dialogue, which is such a shame because from a gameplay perspective, it is the best Borderlands game yet, like in every conceivable way. Everything about this game is amplified from the previous ones, the good and the bad. Any problems I experienced, I also typically experienced in previous Borderlands titles. But there are so many ways in which this one was improved. Keep in mind for this, I'm only reviewing a small slice of the gameplay. This game includes 3 different possible action skills for the 4 different character classes as opposed to the just one from before. The game is also meant to be played through several times, and this is an experience that I did solo, whereas there is cooperative play, which is typically more fun. I won't be talking about the DLC because it costs money. And I don't know if you know this, but I've been pouring most of my time into a YouTube channel that is not monetized. So share this around if you want me to have money ever again. To start off, I chose Flak. He's the Beastmaster class. And keep in mind, before I say this, as far as Borderland characters go, the bar is very, very low, but I found him endearing. The action skills I chose for him were releasing racks that do incendiary damage and having a spider ant follow him around and attack enemies with corrosive damage. I was able to fully max out one of his skill trees in just one playthrough, though he had others that you could put points into as you did repeat playthroughs. Both the Spider Ant and Rack abilities could be upgraded and modified. For example, you could increase the number of racks he released and or cause them to heal you for the amount of damage they do. The shooting feels better in this one than any of the others, hands down. It's really responsive, and the gun's sound and animations make for a really satisfying shooting experience. That's really hard to achieve with this huge of a gun variety. Are they as polished as Doom Eternal's guns? No, but there's way more of them. You can't expect that. They could never put that much effort into the number of guns that are available. But that being said, what they did accomplish was incredible. The guns also include an alternate firing mode this time around. They vary from stuff like changing from bullets to mini rockets to also being able to change the gun's element. The switching gun elements is my favorite because it allows each loadout to be so much more effective for given situations. If you played a Borderlands game before, you know about the rock, paper, scissors type system that they have for how elements deal damage. Incendiary does more damage to flesh, shock damage does more to shields, and corrosive damage does more to metals. Having a gun where you can switch between multiple of these increases the number of possible loadouts, because you don't have to worry about filling every slot with a different element. The cryo element has been carried over from the pre-sequel. It freezes enemies and they can be slowed down or outright shatter. They've also added radiation damage. It does damage over time, and enemies killed by it will explode and damage enemies near them. It's pretty dope, honestly. As far as movement goes, they added a slide feature. They also carried over ground slams from the pre-sequel, and there are now ledge grabs. There are some small quality of life improvements too, like being able to completely refill ammo without going into a vending machine menu. Okay, I'd like to provide a couple counter-arguments to some criticisms that have been levied at this game. Keep in mind, if you disagree, that I am correct and my dad is stronger than yours. He can and will beat him up. The first thing I've heard a lot is that there are too many legendaries in this game. There are multiple problems I have with this as a criticism. Firstly, the legendaries add so much variety to the gun selection. They all have special abilities and make the gameplay so much more interesting. It's a shame they are so often reserved for the end game, which is here they're definitely a rarer drop, but you can get them at any point in the game. I know that some people like that they're a grind to get, and I get that. It makes it much more rewarding knowing how much time you put in to get it. You want to beat a big bad boy to get one. You know, you don't want it to just drop in the first area of the game or pop up in a vending machine. I understand that, but I don't think that's worth not having the increased weapon variety throughout the rest of the game. It just makes the whole thing a much more enjoyable experience beginning to end. Also, and I know this will upset a lot of people that don't like the filthy casuals, but a lot of people don't have 300 hours to put into a 30-hour game. They have jobs and kids and other stuff outside of this. They should be able to experience something that's so core to these games, even if they only have time for one playthrough. The second problem with this criticism is that your dad is very weak in comparison to mine. Thirdly, legendaries are not inherently better than non-legendaries you can find. There were definitely occasions where I found a legendary and then within the same hour found like a rare and found that the rare outclassed the legendary and swapped it out. Can legendaries dictate the game difficulty? Absolutely. There was like a 10-hour period where I found a really great shield and I didn't die once because of it. It definitely made the game easier, but this is necessary for the loot grind to even feel satisfying. There has to be overpowered things that you can find. This is what kicks that Pavlovian loop into high gear. Another criticism with the game is that it doesn't do enough to bring in new players. If they're referring to the dialogue, I completely agree. I think this actually drove off some existing players. But I think that most are saying this in response to the gameplay. This I take issue with. Some games appeal to large varieties of people, like God of War, Spider-Man PS4, and there's nothing wrong with that. I absolutely love those games. But not every game can be like that and still be successful. Some games fill smaller niches, and that's how they achieve success. This is why I think it was a great decision to refine the existing gameplay the way they did, and put out just another good looter shooter like the others, but with greater scale and variety. Bring in the players that already wanted this, which is already a large base, and a few new ones that don't know that they like this gameplay loop yet. Some things will sell better and be better received in their respective genres than if they try to shoot for a more mass appeal. Oh, also, fight for your life mode. I hear this criticism a lot where people say that fight for your life mode is a way of fixing bad game balancing, and even if that's true, I still like its inclusion. There are some battles that are just so hectic and chaotic, and you'll go down several times but get several second wins and just make it through, and those are a blast to win. Okay, so let's get into some criticisms I do agree with. The first of which is that the vehicle handling is trash. The method of adjusting the camera to change the direction of the vehicle, I already don't like, but that's not even done well here. Everything feels so janky, and the aiming mechanics with it are even worse. They're just so jerky, even with the analog sensitivity turned way down. There were so many times where I legitimately got out of my vehicle to fight another vehicle on foot because it was so much more effective. Also, the fact that they had side missions based around the vehicles I think was a terrible idea. They're just not fun at all. I don't know why they couldn't just leave the vehicles exclusively a way to get from point A to point B faster and not try to make them a greater part of the gameplay. I know these problems are likely lessened with mouse and keyboard, and I played on PS4, but I still take issue with them. The side missions frequently require you to run all over huge maps. I have no problem with side missions being fetch quests or repetitive activities in a game like this. I think those are actually pretty fitting in this case, but it frequently felt like padding to just up the completion time of this game. With how many missions had you run to an area only to have an NPC go, "Oh, you actually can't get through this gate, but it's only 72 miles to go around the other way." No part of that is fun. I would have much rather the game be shorter than have to do this, especially when there's so much replay value. It's just so unnecessary. The game is also shockingly poorly optimized. You can probably see frame drops the entire time I'm talking over footage. This is very jarring coming off of Ghost of Tsushima, which definitely looked more graphically taxing but still managed to maintain a significantly more consistent frame rate than this. I have no problem with stylized visuals that aren't photorealistic. I think they look great usually. My issue is that this game should be able to run at a consistent frame rate on a base PS4 if Ghost of Tsushima could. You can't have these low-res visuals and not run well. Also, there is a mission where they make fun of poorly optimized games with fetch quests in the middle of this game, and the lack of self-awareness is incredible. I honestly at times couldn't tell if it was part of the joke or just part of the actual game. At least the load times are quick. Also, remember how I talked about elevation differences in Tsushima being easy to overcome? That is not the case at all here. It is a huge pain in the ass to try to find a way up sometimes, further padding the length of this game. Okay, next, nitpicks and glitches. These are not as big of a deal, but were annoying on some level nonetheless. Number one, I think I speak for everyone when I say the live-action Lilith creeps us out. Number two, you still can't track multiple missions at the same time. Number three, there was this weird thing in the game where I had a side mission show up on my map hours before I could access it, and I just ran around like a moron trying to find it. Number four, if you hate spending time sifting through menus, you're gonna have a huge problem with this game. They haven't done much to speed up the process aside from giving weapons an overall rating separate from the rest of their stats, but I found these to be often misleading and still had to look at the individual stats of each gun, which can be very time-consuming. Number 5, this enemy killed me and then trapped me right where I respawned so I couldn't move. Number 6, enemies sometimes take a bizarre amount of time to start talking to you after you've already hit the button to interact with them. Number 7, NPCs have a lot of pathfinding issues. Go. What? Just go. Oh my god, are you fucking kidding me? Number 8, sometimes the new ledge grab mechanic doesn't work, and this can lead to varying degrees of frustration. Number 9, the last power-up slot takes way too long to unlock. Number 10, sometimes 2 echo recordings will play at the same time, and it makes you anxious. Number 11, there were not enough fast travel stations given the size of the maps and the amount of times they make you run all over the place. Number 12, I think this was supposed to have animations on it, and it's just a blank screen for like 7 minutes. Okay, so I'm not going to go in depth on the game's story at all. The story isn't why I play Borderlands games. It's a really similar narrative to previous titles, except everything is bigger. They scaled everything up. You have to beat the bad guys to get to the vault, but there are a bunch of smaller vaults along the way. They also raise the stakes in that the villains can take Siren's powers, and the villains differentiate themselves a bit from previous villains by A, there are 2 of them, and B, they turn against each other a little bit. They are cult leaders, and that cult is what the game is centered around. I'm super interested in cults, but this was very underwhelming. The most interesting parts of cults is typically their charismatic leaders, but these 2 were just annoying, which ruined the coolest part about cults. Previous Vault Hunters are given more fleshed out characters, just like going from 1 to 2. This game also ups the scale in another way by taking place over multiple planets and having Sanctuary set in a spaceship. This is gonna sound stupid, but I'm a huge sucker for space. You know what's in space? Black holes. Black holes are sick. They don't make an appearance in this game, but I know they're there. Fun fact about black holes, they can even suck in light, and the only thing in the universe that can bring that light back out is me because it wants to sneak a peek. But it looks super cool when you travel to a new planet, and it results in much more varied locations. Also, the anti-capitalism themes are still present in this one, but it feels more like a we have to protect good corporations from bad corporations message, as you meet a lot of the owners of these gun companies you've been purchasing from the whole series. It was a strange approach, but if you know anything about Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford, he very likely sees himself as one of these saint-like corporation owners, so I see why it was framed this way, but spoiler on that, he's a psychopath for reals though. I want to round this video out on a positive note, so here are some other positives I haven't talked about yet. First off, I thought Iridium was going to end up being borderline useless in this one, as storage deck upgrades to increase your carrying capacity are purchased with normal currency instead of Iridium like in the previous game. The only place you can spend the Iridium is at a vending machine that only takes Iridium, but the guns there aren't much better than the guns in other vending machines. But then, at the end of the game, you get a gun that uses Iridium for ammo that shoots other guns, and this makes the whole thing worth it. Another thing I enjoyed was the number of bosses and named enemies in general. It felt like a huge uptick from previous installments. There were just a lot more sources of enemies that dropped higher quality loot. Also, Mouthpiece, arguably the first real boss, is a very aesthetically cool fight with neon colors and explosions. There is also an increase in enemy variety along with returning favorites like the Goliaths, where you shoot their hat off and they level up. I love this because it keeps you on your toes when you're so used to immediately firing at enemy weak points. After one of the villains, Troy, absorbs Maya's powers, he gains the ability to make some enemies anointed enemies. This makes them more powerful and increases their moveset, further adding to this variety. Okay, thus concludes the Borderlands 3 videos. I might revisit this at a future date with a full series review if I end up amassing a following and have the time to invest in that. Hope you enjoyed watching these videos though. Like, subscribe, and click the notification bell, friends.